Good morning, everyone. My name is Michelle and I'll be your webinar moderator today. Today's webinar is being presented by Matt Arkell from the New South Wales Environmental Protection Agency. Matt Arkell is the New South Wales EPA's Principal Technical Advisor for Dangerous Goods. Matt has held this role at the EPA since 2018 and support the EPA's regulation of dangerous goods through technical advice to EPA regulatory and policy officers, the industry, other regulators, and the community. In addition to work internally at the EPA, Matt is the EPA's representative on the Competent Authorities Panel and is the current chair of CAP. With a background in chemistry, he has experience in risk management from a number of perspectives, such as quality, environmental, safety, and compliance. His work in research and development, laboratory, and transport operations gives a broad perspective on the challenges of operating with hazardous chemicals and dangerous goods. Like always, we'd love to hear from you during today's presentation. If you have a question, please feel free to type it in the Q&A section at the bottom of the screen. You may send in your questions at any time during the presentation. We'll be answering questions at the end of the session. So welcome, Matt. Over to you.
Okay, thanks everybody for making time today to come and listen to me speak about what's going on in dangerous goods in New South Wales. As you may or may not be aware, we are required to remake our dangerous goods regulations every 5 years. We can usually push that out a year or two, but eventually we get told we have to do it. And so there's been a few changes to the dangerous goods regulations, and I'm happy. Nat Road asked me if I could provide an update on what changes we've made and some of the things that are going on in dangerous goods in New South Wales. And I'm always happy to talk to industry about what we're doing. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Matt Arkell. I'm the EPA's Principal Technical Advisor for the transport of dangerous goods. We also provide advice internally on storage and handling of dangerous goods, which the EPA does regulate some things of in New South Wales. And I am also the EPA's representative on the Competent Authorities Panel, and I'm currently the chair of the Competent Authorities Panel. So working with the other jurisdictions to ensure that everything is as smooth and harmonious as we could possibly make it. So there's been a few, to give you a bit of background as to why we've made some of the changes to the regulation over the last, in the last year or so. We undertook a program recently to look into the maintenance, inspection and maintenance of tankers that are used for DG transport. I'm not sure how many Nat Road members are also operators of tank vehicles, but tank vehicles represent some of the highest risk in dangerous goods transport. So that's always going to be a focus for us. As everybody may be aware, there have been incidents involving rollovers that have led to fatalities over the past decade or so, and before that. So this is an area of interest for us. So what we did in this program, we undertook a survey of a cross-section of dangerous goods tank transporters. We looked at both regional and metro operators, and we looked at tank operators of varying fleet sizes. And the main focus of this program was looking at data gathering and intelligence. It didn't have a strict compliance focus. We were interested to know what the level of compliance was in the industry. So we wanted to understand, does industry understand its inspection and maintenance obligations for tank vehicles? And how does it manage its record keeping relating to those obligations? Interesting areas, and generally we tend to think about these things as if these key performance things aren't met, then there's probably going to be failings elsewhere. So what did we find in this program? We found that the larger fleet operators generally have a pretty solid understanding of their maintenance obligations, and we've also found good record keeping practices. We found that smaller operators are a lot more reliant on service providers. This was focused at the fuel industry, so Safe Load program operates in a lot of the fuel industry, and smaller operators are heavily reliant on their service providers like maintenance providers and inspection locations for SLP to ensure that their tankers are compliant. That is a concern for us. That means that when a tanker operator takes a tank to an inspection location or to a maintenance facility, they're relying on that person to know what appropriate maintenance is for a tank vehicle. That is a concern, but you know, not everybody can be an expert in everything. So how can we lift performance there? So what we're doing is we've used that information to inform how we're going to inform our regulatory focus relating to tanker maintenance. We found that tankers are being inspected. They're not always being inspected at the frequency that the regulations, that's the ADG code and the Australian standard, demand. And so what can we do to lift performance in that area? You may be aware that we have a tank vehicle inspection manual. It hasn't been updated since the 2020 editions of the standard were published. It doesn't provide enough information for operators on how to ensure that they comply, and we haven't quite got that out as far and as wide as we would like. So we've been preparing a new manual. Australian standards have an updated AS 2809.1 and 0.2. So that's all tankers and flammable tankers. When that is published, we will be getting that. We'll be finalising the consultation on that and getting it out. I'm on the standards technical committee, so I'm familiar with the content that's in there, and so we're just waiting. We're at the mercy of Standards Australia, which, as some of you may or may not know, can be a challenging thing to be at the mercy of. But we're working on a communication program. We want to get this to as many operators and people who do vehicle maintenance as possible. And the other leg of our response was to include a duty on the people who actually perform these inspection and maintenance tasks. If you're the operator of a tank vehicle and you're relying on your mechanic to do the inspection properly, under the old legislation, you were entirely liable for that. You had essentially limited. We had limited ability to look at the facilities who are doing inspection and maintenance. And so now we can actually clarify the duty on these people. For the operators of vehicles that are licensed but aren't necessarily aren't tank vehicles, so they require DG licensing because of the dangerous goods you're transporting, but they're not a tank vehicle. The inspection and maintenance requirements in the ADG code are relatively straightforward. The vehicle needs to be roadworthy. So provided you're doing the maintenance required to ensure that that trailer or vehicle is in a roadworthy condition, you've got no concerns. So what else is in the remade dangerous goods regulation? The duty on persons performing maintenance that I've just mentioned. You may recall that in 2014, the New South Wales EPA made a determination that applied to tank trailers requiring them to be fitted with roll stability systems. That came into effect for all tank vehicles all tank trailers as of the start of 2019. That was done in the form of a determination, and with this update, what we've done is we've taken the opportunity to move that from a determination into the regulation itself. We felt that's a more appropriate place for that to live. It's hard to find a determination, whereas the regulation is a clear requirement. We've included prohibited routes for dangerous goods transport under the dangerous goods legislation. So one of the concerns that we found, we identified a few years ago, we identified a particular tank vehicle driver and a tank vehicle operator who were flipping the placards on their petrol tankers to show combustible liquid for the purposes of accessing tunnels. We've prosecuted 3 drivers and the company. The company has been convicted on 6 counts of unsafe transport. We're awaiting sentencing on that. But we decided that it was necessary to have a clear requirement that the prohibited routes for dangerous goods transport that are found in the New South Wales Transport road rules are mirrored under the dangerous goods legislation to ensure that it's not just a road rules offence. If your drivers are using prohibited routes, it's an offence under the dangerous goods legislation as well. The rules are the same. So you are under there are no separate rules. All we've done is we've referred to the table of prohibited routes in the road rules legislation. If that table ever changes, our legislation changes automatically because it simply refers to it. We've clarified a couple of things relating to dangerous situation notifications. So in the event that your vehicle is transporting dangerous goods and it's involved in an incident that results in a dangerous situation, so that's a significant loss of dangerous goods or risk of loss of dangerous goods, you're required to notify the New South Wales EPA. Under the old legislation, the driver was required to notify the EPA, as was the prime contractor. We don't think it's appropriate that drivers should be expected to contact the EPA when they've just been involved in an incident involving dangerous goods. They need to call the prime contractor, the transport company, and they need to call the emergency services. They don't need to call us. However, what we've clarified as part of that is that as soon as reasonably practicable, but within an hour of becoming aware of the incident, the EPA needs to be notified. So that's a phone call. That's a phone call to 131 555 in New South Wales to inform us that one of your vehicles has been involved in an incident involving dangerous goods. From there, the incident then proceeds as it always has. It's fire and rescue and police have control of the situation until they say they don't, and if required, the prime contractor or the consignor is required to recover the dangerous goods. That's more of an issue for tank transport than it is for transport of dangerous goods in packages. So prohibited routes. This is the covert use of prohibited routes that we identified. So we identified 3 drivers. So the first driver was caught in the act. He was followed through a tunnel by one of our officers and stopped. And we went back and reviewed a significant amount of evidence, and we found that it was a systematic behavior at that company. And so the 2 other drivers were identified, as was the company. And this is a good example of the question of, do you know where your drivers are? Do you know what they're doing? And it's not enough for companies to ignore what their drivers are doing. Again, this is particularly a problem in the tanker transport space, especially fuel, where a diesel tanker can look almost exactly the same as a petrol tanker. But we've undertaken a few operations in response to that. We've supported on-road inspections around Port Botany to reinforce that we are interested in whether dangerous goods vehicles are leaving terminals that are a terminal correctly placarded. Port Botany is the biggest concern for us because almost any direction you go from Port Botany, you're likely to run into a tunnel. We've worked with fuel terminals to reinforce that they're in a good position to check placarding prior to departure, so they can undertake random checks to see whether a vehicle that is placarded for diesel actually has petrol on board. And we've undertaken a further operation called Operation Sherlock, looking at the potential use of prohibited routes by vehicles that may be covertly placarded. And so the questions for industry are, what instruction, training, and supervision do you provide for your drivers? Do you know where your trucks are? Do you have a system for if a driver has a brain fart and winds up on a prohibited route, do they know what to do? And do you ever go back and check where your drivers went? We're not expecting that every single driver is monitored every second of the day. That's not the intent here. But are your drivers aware that you are concerned about this? It's a problem for everybody. A dangerous goods transport incident in a tunnel, we're not set up for them, and fire and rescue are absolutely not set up to deal with it. We do not ever want to have to deal with that. So a couple of still images from the work that we've done. So a couple of tankers on General Holmes Drive and around Foreshore. They say they're transporting combustible liquid, presumably diesel, but is it DG? And this is what we found in 2019 when we looked at this particular company. When we actually peeled back the evidence, we found that tankers that looked exactly like this were actually transporting loads of petrol. Just to be clear, we're not undertaking any automated enforcement with this. This is all about research and looking for issues. We have identified a number of vehicles with placards on and have undertaken investigation to determine what an appropriate response is for that. So roll stability systems, we have undertaken a review of the use of roll stability systems. It's similar to our maintenance program, and the early results look encouraging. If you do operate tankers and they are fitted with, or other vehicles that are fitted with roll stability systems, a reminder for you, those systems contain really useful data about your drivers and what their performance is like. And the question is, do you have risky drivers that you're not aware of? If you've got a driver who's triggering their roll stability system on an ongoing basis, they're pushing their truck to the limit and running the risk of rolling it. And so eventually they will find a scenario where the physics will win and the truck will go over. Some of the guidance documents that we've got coming out. This document was released a few months ago. How to prevent fires. This is a truck inspection manual. We're aware of there being around about 200 truck fires in New South Wales each year. Dangerous goods being on the vehicle magnifies the risk, so we felt it was appropriate to provide this guidance. This advice is great. It's a great workshop manual for anyone who is looking after vehicles. You don't have to be transporting DG. DG is our concern. It includes information for drivers on how to spot potential issues before they become a truck that is burnt to the ground, like you can see on the cover. This document is available on our website for free, and I would encourage everybody to read it, review it, and it's got some really useful tips in it to ensure that your vehicles are safer than they may be. Transport emergency response plans. So this document is ready for consultation and will be coming out for consultation on this one very soon. It includes practical information about how to comply with the requirements that relate to transport emergency response planning. All transporters of placard loads of dangerous goods are required to have a transport emergency response plan. Unfortunately, the document that is referenced in the legislation is not great. It's not particularly useful, and so we've prepared this document to support industry to put together practical transport emergency response plans that they can use for relatively simple transport operations. And we know that smaller operators are the ones who genuinely struggle to put together these sorts of documents. We've put together some simple fill in the blank type templates that they can use to ensure that they're ready for an incident when one happens. Unfortunately, you can never deal with it. You have to prepare for incidents before they happen. You can't figure it out on the fly. It doesn't. Life doesn't work that way, sadly. And so that's it. That's my admittedly rather brief, but that's an update on where we're going. There have been some other. There are always other things on foot when it comes to the transport of dangerous goods. The National Transport Commission have a project ongoing to review the ADG code, which we are actively involved in, and we are absolutely keen to ensure that dangerous goods is transported safely and effectively, and to support the industry to meet its obligations.
Thank you, Matt. We do have some questions. The first one, what is New South Wales doing to harmonise dangerous goods regulation around the country?
Yeah, so that's probably exactly that sort of leads in from that National Transport Commission project. So for those of you who aren't aware, and most people probably are, so the ADG code went through a number of revisions, and then in 2008, it went through a significant revision to go from ADG 6 to ADG 7. And ADG 7 borrowed a lot of content from the UN model regulations on dangerous goods transport, but it also borrowed a lot of content from the previous edition of the ADG code. Some of that content is quite aged now, hasn't been reviewed in a very long time. Some of it is maybe no longer fit for purpose. What we're doing is we are borrowing. We are reviewing, and we're going to try and borrow as much as is appropriate content from overseas, from the European ADR, or from other jurisdictions as appropriate. What we're looking to do is we're looking to provide a bit more clarity, a bit more certainty about what our expectations are. That will help to reduce some of the differences between the different jurisdictions. There's a couple of places in the ADG code where information is less clear than I would like, and that creates space for interpretations. So, we participate in the competent authorities panel and all of the processes that surround that. As I mentioned, I'm the chair of the competent authorities panel at the moment. But it's always difficult to, when, even as I know industry suffers greatly when they're presented with a regulation or a requirement that isn't clear. Regulators suffer as well, because it's much easier for us to point to a clear requirement, and we can all interpret it the same way as well. Sadly, we are human too, and we do not always agree on how to interpret a vague provision. So that's a significant chunk of work. That includes work on things like what emergency personal protective equipment the driver is required to carry. I know that the transport of toxics and corrosives and requiring self-contained breathing apparatus is a controversial one. There's a whole bunch of things that we're looking at, and so we're really working together to try and help that. Another area that we're working on, we're engaging with the National Heavy Vehicle Regulator to support them to understand where DG is a risk. They operate across a lot of the country, and so we can work with them to improve the standard across the country, we hope.
Great, thank you. We've two more questions so far. This one is quite a long one. We transport Class 6 infectious substances individually packaged to the Fairfield Hospital in Melbourne for testing, etc. Also transport small packages of low-level radioactive isotopes, Class 7, to both Victorian and Queensland hospitals for next-day cancer treatments. Can you please explain why we can travel through the St Helena Tunnel in northern New South Wales, but cannot travel through the M5 tunnels or Sydney Harbour tunnels? It should be noted that the alternate non-tunnel routes out of Botany are via major roads of 2 lanes with very heavy traffic and through very closely settled urban areas with big populations. Has a risk study been done for this particular anomaly regarding tunnels in New South Wales? The person who asked the question said they understand the risks with flammables and explosives, but with these 6s and 7s being in the lower range of risks due to very small volumes, low levels, and their safety packaging, they should be allowed through all of New South Wales tunnel systems?
Mm-hmm. It's genuinely a good question. In the world of dangerous goods, you're always trying to strike a balance between rules that are relatively easy to explain versus rules that are a bit more granular, shall we say. With the particular, infectious substances, I'll set to one side for a second. If the radioactive substances are short half-life radioisotopes, they are permitted to travel through the tunnel if they're for medical use. I'd encourage the person who raised the question to send me an email, and maybe we can have a chat about those specifics. I'll be honest, I'm not personally aware of a study being done into it. It is a genuinely an interesting question, but it's also about how do we communicate that with industry, and so it's probably a bit of a challenging question to answer in a simple forum like this. But I'm happy to have a more detailed discussion about that.
Great. Our next question. Would you consider any stakeholder engagement activities such as the NHVR are doing to raise awareness and offer the opportunities for stakeholders to have a dialogue with the regulator?
Absolutely. Again, that's an area that's close to my heart, and something that I would like us to do better on. So I will make a note of that, and I'm happy to raise that. It's an area that we are doing some work on at the moment. So watch this space. And as I mentioned earlier on, we've got some documents that will be coming out for consultation soon. I'll make sure that NatRoad is included in that, and that way those things can be distributed to their members. But if you're interested in engaging with us, please reach out.
Great. One more question. We have never carted dangerous goods before, but have been asked to carry lithium batteries in a mixed load. What do we need to do to comply?
Great question. Lithium batteries are the future of dangerous goods transport. I realized that a couple of years ago, and every month I think I deal with more and more lithium batteries. So lithium batteries are a class 9 dangerous good. One of the problems with lithium batteries is they don't fit neatly into the dangerous goods framework. That's one of the challenges, but they do present some serious risks. If you're not familiar with dangerous goods transport, the first step will be to familiarize yourself with dangerous goods transport. If you're undertaking the transport of dangerous goods, it needs to be done lawfully, and it needs to be done in accordance with the regulations and safely. So you need an understanding, and you'll probably need to work with the consignor to understand whether the lithium batteries you're transporting make up a placard load or not, because if it's a placard load, then there's going to be additional controls. It's a detailed topic. There's some quite good information on the EPA website, which I've just realized I haven't put a link to there, but you can see that it's epa.newsouthwales.gov.au. We have information on the controls and when they're required on our dangerous goods website. So that will outline for you when you need particular controls. If the vehicle is a placard load, if it's less than a placard load, then it'll be transport documents. If it's more than a placard load, then you need to start implementing things like placarding on the vehicle. You need to ensure that the load is properly restrained in accordance with the DG regulations. That the required safety equipment is being carried. It's a bit detailed. Again, my contact details are there. Happy for the person who asked that question to get in touch with me, and I can probably talk through their specific situation in a little bit more detail. There's a few interesting concessions and things that apply to lithium batteries, so it can be challenging. It's an area that I want to prepare some clearer guidance on, because, like I said, lithium batteries are the future, and they don't fit neatly in. So we need to make sure that everybody knows what they need to do.
Right, thank you. Well, that concludes the questions. So thank you, Matt, and thank you everyone for attending today's webinar. If you have any other questions, please send an email to info@natroad.com.au or to Matt's email provided on the screen. Today's webinar will be uploaded to the website and our YouTube channel, so please share with your colleagues. Have a great day.
Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you.
And thanks, everyone.